Hey night traveler, welcome to the Stealth Podcast. Here, you'll hear chilling stories to help you drift to sleep or keep you awake. Before we start, drop a comment telling me what time you're tuning in and where you're listening from. Now, kill the lights, put your headphones on, and let's hit the road. My name is Derek Paulson. I'm 43 years old, and I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'd been planning this cross-country RV trip for months. Me, my wife Janet, and our old college buddy Marcus, who'd flown in from Portland to join us for the Texas leg of the journey. We'd been on the road for 2 weeks, and honestly, it had been everything I'd hoped for. Freedom, open highways, and that sense of adventure you only get when your home has wheels. Janet was the planner, always mapping out the next spot, while Marcus and I just went with the flow, cracking jokes and reliving our 20s. We rolled into the outskirts of Texarkana on a Tuesday evening in late September. The sun was setting, painting the sky this disturbing shade of orange and red that made everything look like it was on fire. We'd been driving for 7 hours straight, and all 3 of us were exhausted. Janet wanted to find an RV park, but they were all booked solid, some kind of local festival happening that weekend. Marcus suggested we just find a quiet spot off the beaten path, somewhere free where we could crash for the night. I wasn't thrilled about it, but my back was killing me from driving, and I just wanted to stretch out. We ended up on this old service road about 15 miles outside town, pulled off into a clearing surrounded by dense woods. It seemed peaceful enough, maybe a little too isolated, but we'd done this before in Colorado without any issues. The thing that struck me right away was how quiet it was. I mean, scary quiet. No crickets, no birds, nothing. Just this heavy silence that pressed down on you like a wet blanket. Janet made some comment about it being eerie, but she laughed it off and started preparing dinner while Marcus and I set up the outdoor chairs. We were grilling burgers, drinking beer, acting like we didn't have a care in the world. But I kept getting this feeling, like when you're a kid and you think someone's watching you from your closet, but you're too scared to check. I kept glancing at the tree line, expecting to see something, but there was nothing. Just darkness creeping in as the sun disappeared completely. Around 9 o'clock, we noticed car headlights way down the service road, maybe half a mile away. They sat there for a while, not moving, just pointing in our direction. Marcus joked that it was probably teenagers looking for a place to make out, and we all laughed, but the lights made me uncomfortable. After about 10 minutes, they slowly started moving toward us, crawling along that dirt road like whoever was driving was in no rush at all. The headlights got closer and closer, and my heart started doing this weird thing where it felt like it was beating in my throat. Janet grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in tight. The vehicle, an old pickup truck we could see now, stopped about 50 yards from our RV. The engine kept running, headlights still blazing right at us. Nobody got out. Nobody said anything. It just sat there, idling in the dark, and that's when I realized this night was about to become something horrible. Marcus stood up from his chair, squinting against the headlights. "Hey," he called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Can we help you with something?" Nothing. No response. Just that truck sitting there like a predator watching its prey, engine rumbling low and menacing. I told Janet to get inside the RV, and for once she didn't argue with me. She grabbed her beer and disappeared through the door, and I could hear her locking it behind her. Marcus looked at me, and I could see in his eyes that he was thinking the same thing I was. This wasn't right. This was the kind of scenario you hear about in those true crime podcasts, the ones that start with they were just minding their own business, and end with search parties and police tape. The headlights suddenly cut off, plunging everything into complete darkness except for our small campfire. And that's when we heard it. A car door opening with that long, slow creak that sounds like nails on a chalkboard. Someone was out there, and they were coming closer. The footsteps were deliberate, crunching on the gravel and dead leaves, getting closer, but taking their sweet time about it. Marcus and I stood there frozen like idiots, our eyes trying to adjust to the darkness now that those headlights were off. I could barely make out a figure moving toward us, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a dark jacket or maybe coveralls. My brain was screaming at me to get inside the RV, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It's weird how fear does that to you. Just shuts down your basic survival instincts. The fire cast these flickering shadows that made everything look distorted and nightmarish, and I couldn't tell if this person was 10 feet away or 30. "Evening, fellas." The voice was rough, gravelly, like someone who'd smoked 2 packs a day for 40 years. He stepped into the firelight, and I got my first good look at him. Late 50s, maybe early 60s, with a weathered face that had seen too much sun and hard living. He wore dirty coveralls with dark stains I didn't want to think too hard about, and he was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that makes your stomach drop. Didn't mean to startle you boys. Just saw your fire and thought I'd come say hello. Not many folks camp out here anymore. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. Yeah, well, we're just passing through. Heading west tomorrow morning, early. The man nodded slowly, his eyes moving between us, and then settling on the RV. That's a nice rig you got there. Real nice. You and your wife traveling alone. That question hit me like ice water. How did he know Janet was my wife? How did he know there was a woman with us at all? Marcus must have caught it too because I felt him tense up beside me. We're actually meeting up with some friends. I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. They should be here any minute, actually. Whole caravan of us. The man's smile widened, showing yellowed teeth with gaps. Is that right? Funny, I've been watching this road for about an hour now, and I haven't seen nobody else come through. The way he said, watching, made my skin crawl. He'd been out there in the dark, observing us, and we'd had no idea. I thought about the stories I'd heard, the horror stories about people who prey on travelers, about the highway killers, or whatever they called them in the 70s. This was Texas, home to some of the most disturbing crimes in American history. Well, listen, we appreciate you stopping by, Marcus said, his voice getting firmer now. But we're pretty tired, and we're turning in for the night. He was trying to establish boundaries, trying to politely tell this guy to get lost, but the man didn't move. He just stood there, staring at us with those dead eyes, and then he did something that made my blood run cold. He pulled out a knife, not threatening us with it, just casually cleaning his fingernails with it like it was the most natural thing in the world. It was a hunting knife, big and scary looking, with a blade that caught the firelight. You know, he said conversationally, still working on his nails, this area has a real interesting history. Back in 1946, there were these murders. The Phantom Killer, they called him, never caught the bastard. He'd attack couples in lovers' lanes, parked cars, isolated spots, just like this one. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. He was telling us this for a reason, and it wasn't to give us a history lesson. Marcus took a step back toward the RV, and I matched his movement. That's real interesting. But like my friend said, we're calling it a night. The man looked up from his knife, his expression changing to something darker, something hungry. Problem is, I don't think you boys understand where you are. This is my land. You're trespassing, and I don't take kindly to trespassers, especially ones who bring their pretty wives out here where anything could happen to them. The way he emphasized anything made bile rise in my throat. Inside the RV, I could see Janet peeking through the curtains, her face pale with fear. The man followed my gaze and waved at her with his knife hand, that horrible smile never leaving his face. Tell you what, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Why don't we all go inside that nice RV of yours and have ourselves a little chat? I got some things I need to discuss with all three of you. Marcus made his move before I could even process what was happening. He grabbed the cast iron skillet we'd used for the burgers, still sitting on the grill grate, and swung it hard at the man's head. The guy was faster than he looked though, dodging back just enough that the skillet only grazed his shoulder. But it was enough to knock him off balance, and Marcus didn't hesitate. Get in the RV. Now, he screamed at me, and this time my legs remembered how to work. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the handle, while Marcus kept himself between me and this psycho. I heard the man laugh, actually laugh, like this was all some kind of game to him. Janet threw the door open, and I practically fell inside, turning back to yell for Marcus. He was backing toward us, still holding that skillet like a weapon, and the man was just standing there watching him with this amused expression. You boys are making this more fun than it needs to be, he said, and then he whistled, sharp and loud. That's when we heard them. Dogs. Big ones, from the sound of it, barking and snarling from somewhere in those woods. Marcus's eyes went wide and he ran, jumping into the RV, just as I saw three massive shapes emerge from the tree line. German shepherds, maybe, or some kind of mix, and they were charging straight for us. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the deadbolt. The dogs hit the side of the RV like freight trains, barking and scratching at the door, their claws scraping against the metal in this horrifying rhythm. "Start the engine." Janet was screaming at me, but I was already moving, climbing into the driver's seat while Marcus checked that all the windows were secured. My keys, where were my keys? I'd left them in my pocket, thank God, and I jammed them into the ignition with trembling fingers. The engine turned over once, twice, and for one horrible moment, I thought it wouldn't start. Then it roared to life, and I threw it into drive without even thinking about the chairs and equipment we'd left outside. The RV lurched forward, and through the windshield I could see the man standing in front of us, not moving, just staring with that same disturbing smile. He wasn't afraid. He should have been diving out of the way, but he just stood there like he knew something we didn't. I yanked the wheel hard to the right, swerving around him, and the RV fishtailed on the loose gravel. The dogs were still chasing us, keeping pace even as I pushed the accelerator down. One of them jumped and hit the passenger side window, its teeth snapping inches from the glass, and Janet let out a scream that I'll hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. We bounced onto the service road, the suspension groaning under the rough treatment, and I didn't let up on the gas. 40 miles per hour, 50, faster than you should ever drive an RV on a dirt road, but I didn't care. I just needed distance between us and whatever the hell that was back there. Marcus was in the back, looking out the rear window. "They stopped," he said, breathing hard. "The dog stopped at the clearing, but he's getting in his truck. Derek, he's following us." I looked in the side mirror and saw the headlights fire up again, that old pickup starting to move. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, knuckles white, and I was trying to remember how far it was back to the main highway. 10 miles. 15? The service road seemed to go on forever, twisting through the woods, and I kept expecting the truck to catch up to us, to ram us from behind or force us off the road. Janet was on her phone, her voice shaking as she tried to explain to the 911 operator where we were. But she didn't know. None of us knew exactly where we were. Just somewhere outside Texarkana, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. The operator kept asking for landmarks, for road names, and Janet was getting more frantic, almost hysterical. "We don't know. We're being chased. There's a man with dogs and a knife, and he's..." The phone cut out. No signal. Of course there was no signal out here. The headlights behind us were getting closer, and I realized with a sinking feeling that his truck was faster than our RV. Of course it was. We were in a 30-foot house on wheels, and he was in a vehicle built for these roads. He was gaining on us, 20 yards, 15, and then he was right on our bumper. The impact came without warning, a loud crunch as his truck rammed into the back of the RV. Janet screamed again, and Marcus fell forward, catching himself on the dinette table. I struggled to keep control, the steering wheel jerking in my hands as the RV swerved. He hit us again, harder this time, and I heard something break, one of the taillights, maybe, or part of the bumper. Through the mirror, I could see him clearly now in his truck's cabin, illuminated by the dashboard lights, and he was grinning like a maniac, clearly enjoying this. This wasn't about protecting his property or scaring off trespassers. This was something else, something darker. He was hunting us, and we were running out of road. The main highway appeared ahead like salvation, those blessed streetlights glowing in the distance, and I pushed the RV as hard as it would go. We were maybe half a mile away when his truck suddenly backed off, the headlights dropping behind us until they were just distant points of light. I didn't trust it, kept my foot on the gas until we hit the pavement of Highway 82, and only then did I risk a glance back. He'd stopped at the edge of the service road, just sitting there in the darkness, watching us escape. Marcus was breathing hard, leaning against the kitchen counter like he'd just run a marathon. Is he really letting us go? Janet's voice was small, broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd planned this whole trip. I didn't answer because I didn't know, and honestly, I was too busy trying not to crash as we merged onto the highway. We drove straight through the night, didn't stop until we hit a Love's truck stop outside of Mount Pleasant about 45 minutes later. The parking lot was lit up like daytime, filled with semis and RVs and normal people doing normal things, and I'd never been so happy to see civilization in my entire life. I pulled into a spot near the building, as close to other people as I could get, and just sat there shaking. My whole body was trembling, adrenaline draining out of me, and leaving me feeling hollow and sick. Marcus was the first one to speak. We need to call the police. Report this. That guy. He's going to do this to someone else if he hasn't already. He was right, of course, but part of me just wanted to keep driving, to get as far from Texas as possible and pretend this never happened. We went inside and found a state trooper having coffee at the counter. Lucky break. Or maybe divine intervention, I don't know. His name was Officer Hartwell, mid-40s with that weathered look cops get after years of dealing with humanity's worst. We told him everything, talking over each other in our hurry to get it all out, and I watched his expression change from polite interest to serious concern. He took us outside to look at the RV, and the damage was worse than I'd thought. The back bumper was crumpled, one taillight completely shattered, and there were scratches all along the side from those dogs. Deep scratches, like they'd been trying to claw their way inside. Hartwell ran his hand over the scratches, frowning. You said this was on a service road off Route 67, about 15 miles outside Texarkana? We nodded, and he pulled out his radio, speaking in that coded language cops use that civilians can never quite understand. What he told us next made my stomach turn. That area, that specific stretch of road, had been the site of multiple disappearances over the past 8 years. Mostly travelers, mostly people in RVs or camping setups, and none of them had ever been found. The local police suspected someone was targeting isolated campers, but they'd never had any witnesses, never had anyone escape to tell them what happened. We were the first. Hartwell called in backup, and soon there were 3 more patrol cars at that truck stop, all of them asking us questions, taking statements, photographing the RV. They wanted us to ride along with them back to the service road, to show them exactly where it happened, but there was no way in hell I was going back there. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Janet was sitting in the RV, wrapped in a blanket even though it wasn't cold, and she hadn't said a word in over an hour. She just stared at nothing, and I knew this trip, this whole adventure we'd planned, was ruined forever. A detective showed up around 3 in the morning, a woman named Rodriguez who specialized in violent crimes. She spread out a map on the hood of her car and had us mark where we'd been, and then she showed us something that made my blood run cold all over again. Red circles on that map, dozens of them, marking spots where people had vanished. And they formed a pattern, a hunting ground that spread across 3 counties. The man you described, Rodriguez said, pulling out a sketch pad. I need you to work with our artist. Because if he's who I think he is, we've been looking for him for a very long time. She wouldn't tell us more than that, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew him. The police knew about him. And somehow, impossibly, we'd gotten away from someone who'd made a career out of making people disappear into the Texas night. Marcus looked at me, and I could see the same thought reflected in his face. We should be dead. By all rights, we should be dead or worse right now. Just 3 more red circles on that detective's map. We spent the next 6 hours at the Texas Department of Public Safety office in Texarkana, working with their sketch artist while Rodriguez coordinated search teams to comb that service road. The artist was patient, asking us about every detail, the shape of his jaw, the gaps in his teeth, the dead look in his eyes. When she finally turned the sketch pad around to show us, Janet started crying. It was him, exactly him, captured in pencil and charcoal like he was staring at us all over again. Rodriguez took one look at the sketch and her face went pale. She stepped out of the room for a minute, and we could hear her on the phone, her voice urgent but too quiet to make out words. When she came back, she had a file folder with her, one of those old accordion ones stuffed with papers and photographs that looked like it had been sitting in evidence storage for decades. His name is William Hodge, Rodriguez said, sitting across from us and opening the file. At least, that's what we think his real name is. He's been on our radar since 1997, linked to at least 14 disappearances across East Texas, possibly more in Louisiana and Arkansas. We've never been able to make anything stick. No bodies, no witnesses, no physical evidence connecting him to the victims. He owns about 300 acres of land out where you were, inherited it from his father, and we've searched it twice with cadaver dogs. Found nothing. She slid a photograph across the table, and it was him, maybe 10 years younger, but definitely the same man. That same disturbing smile, those same dead eyes. Marcus picked up the photo, his hand shaking slightly. How is he still walking around free if you know he's doing this? Rodriguez's expression was frustrated, angry, because knowing and proving are 2 different things. Every time we get close, every time we think we have something, it falls apart. Witnesses recant, evidence disappears, and Hodge always has an alibi, usually involving his brother who lives in Shreveport. They're connected somehow, we know that, but we can't prove it. She pulled out more photos, and these were harder to look at. Missing person flyers, smiling faces of people who'd never come home. A couple from Michigan, a family of 4 from Oklahoma, a single woman from Dallas who'd been documenting her solo RV trip on social media until she posted a photo from outside Texarkana and then went silent forever. All of them had disappeared within 50 miles of where we'd been camping. All of them within the last 8 years. Janet couldn't look anymore, turned away and pressed her face against my shoulder. The search teams found our camping equipment scattered around the clearing. Chairs, the grill, Marcus's jacket, but Hodge was gone. His property was empty when they arrived with a warrant at dawn, the house locked up, no vehicles in the driveway, and those dogs nowhere to be found. It was like he'd vanished into thin air, and Rodriguez told us this was his pattern. Whenever things got hot, whenever someone called the police or started asking questions, he'd disappear for weeks or months, lying low until the attention died down. But this time is different, she said, and there was something fierce in her voice. This time we have witnesses. We have your testimony. We have the damage to your RV, and we have proof that he actively hunted you. That's attempted kidnapping at minimum, possibly attempted murder. When we find him, and we will find him, we can finally put him away. We left Texas the next morning, even though Rodriguez wanted us to stay in case they needed us for lineups or further questioning. I promised we'd come back if they caught him, gave them every contact number we had, but I needed to get Janet and Marcus out of there. We drove straight through to New Mexico, barely stopping except for gas, and none of us could sleep even when we tried. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Hodge standing in that firelight, smiling with that knife in his hand. Every sound outside the RV made us jump. Marcus flew back to Portland 2 days later, said he needed to see his kids, needed to hug them and know they were safe. He never talked about coming back on the road with us. Janet and I made it back to Flagstaff, but the RV sat in our driveway for 3 months before I could bring myself to even go inside it. Detective Rodriguez calls me every few weeks with updates. They're still looking for Hodge. He's still out there somewhere. And sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning convinced I can hear dogs barking outside our house. The sketch artist drawing ended up on Texas's most wanted list, and I've seen it shared on social media, people commenting about how scary he looks, how they hope they catch him soon. But I know something they don't. I know what it feels like to be prey, to be hunted by someone who's made an art form out of making people disappear. And I know that somewhere in East Texas, there are 300 acres of land that hold secrets the police haven't found yet. Sometimes I wonder about all those red circles on Rodriguez's map, all those people who didn't make it to the highway. I wonder if they're out there in those woods, and I wonder how many more circles there'll be before someone finally stops William Hodge. We got lucky. We got so impossibly lucky. But luck runs out eventually, and I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, still watching that service road, still waiting for the next RV to pull off into his hunting ground. My name is Valerie Brennan. I'm 52 years old, and I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. After my divorce finalized last spring, I sold the house, split everything down the middle with Tom, and bought myself a 28-foot Winnebago. My daughter Cassie thought I'd lost my mind. A woman my age, traveling alone, no real plan or destination. But I needed this. 30 years of marriage, 23 years raising kids, and I'd never done anything just for me. So here I was, 6 months into my new life, rolling through Texas on a humid October afternoon with my rescue dog Bailey sleeping in the passenger seat and a Spotify playlist that was heavy on Fleetwood Mac and light on regrets. I'd been meandering through the state for about 2 weeks, hitting small towns and avoiding the interstate when I could. There's something about those back roads that feels more authentic, more real than the sanitized version of America you see from the highway. I was heading toward Houston to visit an old college roommate, but I wasn't in any rush. That was the beauty of this lifestyle. Time belonged to me now. I'd stopped for lunch in a tiny place called Needville, and the waitress at the diner told me about this spot along the Brazos River where people sometimes camped for free. It wasn't an official campground, just a wide pull-off with river access that locals used for fishing. She said it was peaceful, Said I'd probably have it to myself on a weeknight. The sun was starting its descent when I found the spot, and she'd been right. It was beautiful. The river moved slow and brown, lined with cottonwood trees that were just starting to turn yellow. There was one other vehicle there, a beat-up conversion van with California plates, and I could see someone sitting in a folding chair by the water. I parked about 50 yards away, giving them their space, and let Bailey out to do her business. She's a border collie mix, smart as hell and protective, and she immediately started sniffing around the perimeter of our camping spot like she was checking for threats. I set up my awning, got my chair out, and cracked open a beer. This was what peace felt like. This was what freedom tasted like. The person by the van waved at me around 7 o'clock, a friendly gesture, and I waved back. They walked over a few minutes later, a woman, maybe late 30s, with long dark hair in a messy bun and the kind of tan you only get from living outside. "Hey there," she said, her smile genuine and warm. "I'm Luna. Just wanted to introduce myself. Let you know I'm not some weirdo or anything." I laughed and told her my name, and we ended up talking for almost an hour. She'd been living in her van for 2 years, working remotely as a graphic designer, traveling wherever the mood struck her. There was something magnetic about her, this energy that made you want to keep listening, keep talking. She told me about places she'd been, hidden gems across the country, and I found myself thinking that maybe this was what I'd been missing, real connection with people who understood this lifestyle. As darkness settled in, Luna invited me to her campfire. She'd built it in this metal fire ring she carried with her, and we sat there drinking wine from her camping mugs and talking about everything and nothing. Bailey had warmed up to her too, which was unusual. My dog didn't typically trust strangers, but she was lying at Luna's feet, letting herself be petted, completely relaxed. We talked about our ex-husbands, about the freedom of the road, about how scary and exhilarating it was to start over. And then Luna said something that should have set off alarm bells, but I was too buzzed and too comfortable to really hear it. "You know, I've been waiting for someone like you to show up. Someone who understands. Someone who's ready for what comes next." I laughed it off, thought she was being philosophical or maybe a little drunk. But when I looked at her face in the firelight, her expression had changed to something I couldn't quite read, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up just a little. Luna refilled my wine, pouring generously from a bottle she pulled out of a cooler, and I remember thinking it tasted different from the first glass, stronger, with a bitter aftertaste I couldn't quite place. I mentioned it, laughing, saying maybe it had gone bad, but she assured me it was just a different vintage, something special she'd been saving. We kept talking, but my head was starting to feel heavy, like it was filled with cotton. Bailey had moved back to my side, whining softly, which was strange because she'd been so calm all evening. I tried to stand up, thinking maybe I just needed to walk it off, but my legs weren't cooperating right. Luna's face came into focus, and she wasn't smiling anymore. She was watching me with this clinical detachment, like I was some kind of experiment she was conducting. "Don't fight it," she said quietly, and her voice sounded far away even though she was right next to me. "It's easier if you just let it happen." Panic shot through the fog in my brain. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I tried to call for help, but my voice came out slurred, barely a whisper. Luna stood up and walked to her van, and when she came back she had rope in her hands. Real, thick rope, the kind you'd use to tie down cargo or secure a boat. My body was shutting down, muscles going slack, and all I could do was watch as she knelt beside me. Bailey was barking now, aggressive and loud, but Luna kicked at her, not hard enough to really hurt, just enough to send her scrambling back. "Your dog's loyal," Luna said conversationally, like we were still just two friends chatting by the fire. "That's good. Loyalty matters." She dragged me, toward her van, and I couldn't stop her, couldn't fight back, couldn't do anything except feel the gravel scraping against my back and try to hold on to consciousness. Inside the van was nothing like I'd expected. It wasn't cluttered with camping gear and personal belongings. It was organized, methodical, with plastic sheeting covering the floor and walls. There were tools hanging on hooks, saws, knives, things I didn't want to identify. And there were photographs taped up, dozens of them, all showing different women. Smiling women, unaware women, women who looked like me. Middle-aged, traveling alone, probably divorced or widowed. Luna saw me looking at the photos and actually smiled, proud, like an artist showing off their gallery. "You're number 17, she said. 17 in 3 years. Not bad, right? My mind was screaming, but my body was useless. She bound my wrists with practiced efficiency, then my ankles, and positioned me sitting up against the wall of the van. The drug she'd given me, whatever it was, kept me conscious but paralyzed, able to see and hear everything but unable to move or speak properly. It was a special kind of horror, being trapped inside your own body while someone calmly explained how they were going to kill you. Luna sat cross-legged in front of me, pulling her hair out of that messy bun and letting it fall around her shoulders. "I used to be like you," she started, her voice almost wistful. "Married, normal life, playing by all the rules. Then I met someone who showed me the truth. Showed me that we're all just meat, just animals, and the only real freedom comes from embracing that." She told me about her mentor, a man named Coral Eugene Watts, though she said that wasn't his real name, just one he'd taken. She'd met him through some dark web forum 5 years ago, before he supposedly died, and he'd taught her everything. How to hunt, how to choose victims, how to make people disappear without leaving traces the police could follow. She talked about him like he was some kind of prophet, some genius who'd figured out life's ultimate secret. And the worst part was how normal she sounded, how rational, like we were discussing a recipe or a book club selection. Coral preferred younger women, Luna continued, standing up and selecting a knife from her collection. "But I like women like us. Women who think they've finally found themselves, who are vulnerable in that specific way that comes from starting over. You trust too easily. You're so desperate for connection that you don't see the danger right in front of you." Luna left the van for a moment, and I could hear her outside, moving around, doing something I couldn't see. Bailey was still barking, frantic now, and I heard Luna yell at her to shut up. The paralysis was absolute. I couldn't even move my eyes properly, just stare straight ahead at those photographs of women who'd made the same mistake I had. Trusted the wrong person, let their guard down at exactly the wrong moment. My phone was in my RV, useless, and even if someone drove by they'd just see 2 campers enjoying a night by the river. Luna had planned this perfectly, and I was just another name she'd add to whatever sick list she kept. The drug was doing something weird to my perception of time. Seconds felt like minutes, and I couldn't tell if she'd been gone for 30 seconds or 10 minutes. When she came back, she was dragging something heavy, and with horror I realized it was a large plastic storage container, the kind you'd use for Christmas decorations or old clothes. She positioned it next to me and opened the lid, and the smell that came out was indescribable. Chemicals and decay, and something sweet that made my stomach heave. "This is where you'll go," she said matter-of-factly. "Once I'm done. Hydrochloric acid, lye, some other compounds I've perfected over time. You dissolve completely in about 72 hours. No bones, no DNA, nothing. Then I just dump the sludge in the river and move on to the next spot." She was explaining her process like she was giving a TED Talk, proud of her innovation, her efficiency. My mind kept trying to find a way out, but there wasn't one. I was going to die here, and no one would ever know what happened to me. Luna knelt in front of me again, the knife in her hand catching the dim light from the battery-powered lantern she'd hung up. "I want you to know this isn't personal," she said, and she actually sounded sincere. "You seem like a nice person, but nice doesn't matter. Nothing matters except the moment, the act, the power of choosing who lives and who doesn't. Coral taught me that. He killed over 80 women before they caught him, and even then they could only prove a handful. He was an artist, and I'm carrying on his work." She pressed the knife against my cheek, not cutting, just letting me feel the cold metal. "I'm going to start slow. Let the drug wear off a bit so you can really feel it. That's important, the feeling. Otherwise it's just butchery, and that's not what this is about." Outside, Bailey's barking had changed pitch. She wasn't just scared anymore. She was trying to alert someone. And then I heard it too. Another vehicle pulling into the camping area, the crunch of tires on gravel. Luna's expression changed instantly from calm to annoyed. She put her hand over my mouth, even though I couldn't scream anyway, and peered out the van's window. "Damn it," she muttered. "It's a cop. State trooper by the look of it." Hope surged through me, desperate and painful. Maybe Bailey's barking had concerned someone. Maybe someone had called about a disturbance. Maybe, impossibly, I wasn't going to die tonight. Luna grabbed a jacket and threw it over me, covering the ropes, then stepped out of the van and closed the door behind her. I could hear her voice, muffled, putting on that friendly persona again. "Evening, officer. Everything okay?" The trooper's voice was male, professional, but cautious. "Got a call about a dog barking for an extended period. Just checking to make sure everything's all right out here." Luna laughed, and it sounded so natural, so normal. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That's my friend's dog. She's inside my van right now. She had a bit too much wine and needed to lie down. The dog got spooked by something in the woods and won't calm down. I was just about to take her back to my friend's RV." There was a pause, and I could imagine the trooper assessing the situation, trying to decide if something was off. "Mind if I take a look around?" Standard procedure. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This was it. This was my chance. If I could just make a sound, any sound, knock something over, anything to alert him that something was wrong. I heard Luna's voice again, still friendly, but with an edge now. "Of course, officer. No problem at all." The van door slid open and light flooded in. The trooper was young, maybe early 30s, with that careful awareness cops develop when something doesn't feel right. His eyes swept the interior of the van, taking in the plastic sheeting, the organized tools, and then landing on me slumped against the wall with a jacket thrown over me. Luna was already talking, her voice smooth and explanatory. "Like I said, too much wine. She's embarrassed about it, passed right out. I was just making sure she was comfortable before I walked her back to her rig." The trooper stepped closer, and I could see his nameplate, Officer Chun. His hand moved to his belt, resting near his weapon, instinct telling him something wasn't adding up. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," he said to Luna, his tone shifting from polite to authoritative. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment he registered the rope around my wrist that the jacket hadn't quite covered. Everything happened fast after that. Chen's hand went to his gun, drawing it in one smooth motion. "Show me your hands." Now, Luna didn't comply. Instead, she lunged for the knife she'd set down, grabbing it and swinging at Chun in a movement so quick and violent it didn't seem real. He fired, one shot, deafening in the confined space of the van, and Luna stumbled backward, clutching her shoulder. But she wasn't down. She was still moving, still dangerous, and the look on her face was pure rage mixed with something else. Disappointment, maybe, like he'd ruined something special. Chun fired again, and this time Luna went down hard, the knife clattering from her hand. He was on his radio immediately, calling for backup and an ambulance, his training kicking in even though I could see his hands shaking. He moved to me, pulling the jacket off and seeing the ropes, the photographs on the wall, the container with its horrible contents. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, and then louder. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" I tried to answer, but my mouth wouldn't work right, the drug still in my system. He started cutting through the ropes with a knife from his own belt, talking to me the whole time, telling me I was safe now, that help was coming, that I was going to be okay. Bailey had found her way into the van somehow, pressing against me and licking my face, whining with relief or fear or both. Luna was still conscious, bleeding onto the plastic sheeting that was supposed to hold my blood, and she was laughing. Actually laughing. This wet, gurgling sound that was more disturbing than anything else she'd done. "You don't understand," she said to Chun, to me, to nobody. I was giving them purpose. They were all just drifting, just wasting their lives, and I gave them meaning. I gave them. She coughed, blood on her lips. Coral was right. You're all too afraid to see the truth. Too afraid to embrace what we really are. Chun told her to shut up and stay down. But she kept talking, rambling about her mentor, about the women she'd killed, about how she'd been so careful, so perfect, and it was just bad luck that he'd shown up when he did. 17, she said again, that number she was so proud of. 17, and you would have been lucky 18, Valerie. You should feel honored. More sirens approached, multiple vehicles, and suddenly the quiet camping spot was flooded with light and activity. Paramedics rushed in, checking me over while other officers secured Luna and began processing what was clearly a crime scene. Detective Rodriguez, the same one from my statement about William Hodge 6 months ago, though I didn't know it then, would later tell me that Luna's real name was Melissa Garza, that she'd been on their radar for months after a pattern of missing female travelers emerged across the Southwest. They found remains in that storage container, DNA from at least 3 victims. They found a laptop with detailed journals describing every murder, photographs, videos. They found a map marked with locations across 7 states where she'd hunted. The photographs on the van wall were her trophies. Women who'd trusted her, who'd shared a campfire and wine and stories, never knowing they were already dead. The drug took hours to fully wear off, and I spent that time in a hospital in Richmond being monitored and questioned gently by detectives who seemed almost as shaken as I was. Chen had saved my life. If he'd arrived 5 minutes later, or if he'd accepted Luna's story and driven away, I'd be dissolving in acid right now. The thought made me vomit twice, even with nothing in my stomach. They told me Luna, Melissa, had died in surgery, that she'd lost too much blood before they could stabilize her. Part of me felt relief, and part of me felt cheated. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand how someone could do what she did and still seem so normal, so relatable. But maybe that was the point. Maybe monsters don't look like monsters until it's too late. The FBI got involved because of the interstate nature of her crimes, and an agent named Morrison spent 3 days walking me through everything I could remember. Every word Luna had said, every detail about her van, anything that might help them identify her other victims. She'd mentioned Coral Eugene Watts, and Morrison's face had gone grim when I brought that up. Watts had been a real serial killer, she told me, one of the most prolific in American history. He'd died in prison back in 2007, so Luna couldn't have actually met him, but she'd clearly studied his methods, idolized him. The dark web forum Luna mentioned led them to a whole network of people who fantasized about murder, who shared techniques and encouraged each other. It was horrifying to learn how many people out there were just waiting for the courage or opportunity to act on their darkest impulses. They recovered my Winnebago and Bailey, both unharmed, though I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the RV for weeks afterward. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luna's face in the firelight, heard her voice explaining calmly how she was going to kill me. The FBI identified 9 of the 17 victims Luna had claimed, 9 families who finally got closure, who finally knew what happened to their mothers, daughters, sisters who'd vanished while living the dream of freedom on the road. The other 8 remained mysteries, women Luna had murdered and disposed of so thoroughly that even her detailed journals couldn't lead investigators to remains. I attended one funeral for a woman named Patricia Simmons from Oregon who'd been 54 when Luna killed her. Her son thanked me for helping catch his mother's killer, and I didn't know how to tell him that I hadn't done anything, that I'd just been lucky. Officer Chun and I stayed in touch. He checked on me every few weeks, and I think maybe talking to me helped him process what he'd seen that night. He'd never fired his weapon in the line of duty before, never killed anyone, and even though everyone told him he was a hero, he struggled with it. We both did, in different ways. I eventually sold the Winnebago, couldn't stand to look at it anymore, couldn't separate it from that night by the river. My daughter Cassie wanted me to move back to Albuquerque, to give up this whole lifestyle and return to something safe and predictable, but I couldn't do that either. Luna had tried to take my freedom, my second chance at life, and I refused to let her win even in death. So I bought a smaller RV, a little 20-footer, and I started traveling again. But this time Bailey wasn't my only companion. I took self-defense classes. I carried pepper spray and a taser. I never camped alone in isolated spots anymore. The thing that haunts me most isn't the fear or the pain or even how close I came to dying. It's how normal Luna seemed, how we'd connected, how I'd liked her, how I'd thought maybe we could be friends. She'd been right about one thing. I had been desperate for connection, vulnerable in a way that made me an easy target. But she'd been wrong about everything else. We're not just meat, not just animals. The fact that people like her exist doesn't prove we're all secretly monsters. It proves the opposite. It proves that kindness and trust and hope are acts of courage, that choosing to believe in people despite the risks is what makes us human. I still travel. I still meet people at campsites and diners and truck stops. I still have faith that most people are good. But now I also know that evil doesn't always look like evil, that sometimes it looks like a friendly woman with a warm smile offering to share her campfire. And I know that 17 women died because they forgot that truth, and I live because a young cop trusted his instincts and showed up at exactly the right moment. That's the difference between a red circle on a detective's map and a second chance at life. Sometimes it's just timing, just luck, just one decision that changes everything. My name is Gordon Mathis. I'm 38 years old, and I live in Boise, Idaho. I work remotely as a software consultant, which means I can do my job from anywhere with decent internet. And about 8 months ago, I decided anywhere should be on the road. I bought a used Airstream, classic silver bullet, vintage 1978, restored to perfection, and I've been bouncing around the western states ever since. My girlfriend Rachel thought I was insane when I told her I was leaving, said I was throwing away stability for some midlife crisis fantasy. We broke up 2 weeks before I left, and honestly, it was the push I needed. Sometimes you have to blow up your life to figure out what you actually want from it. I'd been planning to swing through Austin for a tech conference, but I took a detour through the smaller towns of East Texas because the highways were boring me to death. There's only so many miles of interstate you can drive before your brain turns to mush. I ended up in a town called Tyler, known for roses apparently, and I spent the afternoon walking around their garden center, taking photos for my Instagram. The sun was setting when I decided to find a place to park for the night, and a guy at a gas station told me about this industrial area on the outskirts of town where truckers sometimes parked overnight. Said nobody would bother me there, said it was safe enough. I trusted him because he had kind eyes and a Texas accent that made everything sound honest. The industrial park was mostly empty. A few warehouses, a closed-down manufacturing plant, lots of cracked pavement, and weeds growing through the concrete. I found a spot near a streetlight that was still working and backed the Airstream in. It wasn't scenic, not like camping by a lake or in the mountains, but it was free and it would do for one night. I made myself dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and a beer, and settled in to catch up on work emails. Around 9 o'clock, I noticed a car pull into the lot, an older sedan, dark blue or maybe black in the dim light. It parked about 100 yards away, engine running, headlights off. I watched it for a few minutes, waiting to see if someone would get out, but nobody did. The car just sat there, idling. I went back to my laptop, telling myself it was probably just another traveler or maybe someone on a break from a night shift somewhere. But something about it bothered me, this itch in the back of my brain that I couldn't scratch. The car was still there 20 minutes later, and now I could see someone moving inside it, shadows shifting behind the windshield. I'm not a paranoid person. I've camped in dozens of random spots without incident, but this felt different. This felt wrong. I closed my laptop and moved to the window, keeping the lights in the Airstream dim so I could see out without being seen clearly. The car's door opened, and a figure got out. Male, I thought, though it was hard to tell in the darkness. He stood there for a moment, looking around the lot, and then he started walking toward my Airstream. My heart rate kicked up a notch. I locked the door. It was already locked, but I checked it again anyway and grabbed my phone. The man got closer, and in the glow of the streetlight, I could see him better. 30s maybe, wearing a hoodie despite the warm Texas night, hands in his pockets. He stopped about 20 feet from my door, just standing there, staring at the Airstream. Not at the windows, not trying to see inside, just staring at the vehicle itself like he was appraising it, memorizing it. And then he smiled, this slow spreading grin that I could see even from inside, and he raised one hand in a wave. Not a friendly wave, a mocking wave, like he knew something I didn't. Like he was in on a joke, and I was the punchline. I didn't wave back. I just stood there frozen, phone in my hand, watching him watch me. After what felt like an hour but was probably only a minute, he turned and walked back to his car, got in, and drove away. The whole encounter had lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it left me feeling sick and scared in a way I couldn't quite explain. I didn't sleep well that night. Every sound outside made me jump. Wind rattling a piece of loose metal somewhere, a distant truck on the highway, my own breathing that seemed too loud in the silence. I kept thinking about that smile, that wave, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe he was drunk or high. Maybe he was just some weirdo getting his kicks by scaring people. Maybe it meant absolutely nothing. But my gut told me different. My gut told me I'd just been marked somehow, identified, cataloged. Around 3 in the morning, I finally dozed off. And when I woke up at 7, the industrial park looked completely different in daylight. Mundane, harmless, just empty buildings and cracked asphalt baking in the Texas sun. I made coffee and told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd let my imagination run wild because of a 5-minute encounter with a strange guy. But when I went outside to disconnect my power cord, I'd been running off my generator but wanted to check the connections. I found something that made my blood turn cold. There were chalk marks on the pavement next to my Airstream. Symbols, numbers. I couldn't tell what they meant, but they definitely hadn't been there when I parked the night before. 3 X's in a row, then a circle with a line through it, then what looked like the number 1. It was the kind of thing that looked like code, like someone leaving a message for someone else. I'd heard about this. Hobos used to do it during the Depression, marking houses to tell other hobos whether the residents were friendly or dangerous. But this wasn't that. This was something else. I took photos of the marks with my phone, then scrubbed them away with my shoe, feeling paranoid and stupid, but also deeply unsettled. I fired up the Airstream and got out of that industrial park as fast as I could, heading toward the center of Tyler where there were people and shops and the comforting normalcy of civilization. I found a Starbucks and sat there for 2 hours, using their Wi-Fi to search for information about chalk marks and symbols used by criminals. What I found made me wish I'd stayed ignorant. There were forums, Reddit threads, news articles about a marking system that human traffickers supposedly used, identifying vehicles and potential targets. Most of it was probably urban legend, the kind of scary story that gets passed around social media, but some of it seemed legitimate. And all of it made me feel like I'd stumbled into something dangerous without even realizing it. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting fear control me. So I did what any rational person would do. I went to the local police station and reported what happened. The officer who took my statement was polite, but clearly thought I was overreacting. He wrote everything down, looked at my photos of the chalk marks, and basically told me that weird people exist and sometimes they do weird things, but it probably wasn't anything to worry about. If you're concerned, he said, maybe stick to established RV parks instead of parking in isolated areas. He made it sound like I'd brought this on myself, like I'd been asking for trouble by camping somewhere free instead of paying for a proper spot. I left feeling dismissed and frustrated, but also wondering if he was right. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. I decided to stay in Tyler another day, paid for a spot at an actual RV park with other travelers around, and tried to relax. But that night, around 11 o'clock, I saw the same car. The dark sedan, parked 3 rows over from me in the RV park, with the same figure sitting inside, just watching. I couldn't see his face in the darkness, but I knew it was him. I felt it. This wasn't coincidence. He'd followed me somehow, found me again, and now he was letting me know that he could find me anywhere. I called 911 immediately, told them there was someone suspicious in the parking lot, and by the time the security guard from the RV park came to check it out, the car was gone. Just vanished like it had never been there. The security guard asked me to describe it, but I realized I didn't know the make or model, hadn't caught the license plate, couldn't give him anything useful. I just knew it was the same car, the same person, the same horrible feeling of being hunted. I left Tyler the next morning before sunrise, didn't even bother unhooking properly, just threw everything in the Airstream and hit the road. My plan was to head west, get out of East Texas entirely, maybe make it to Austin where there'd be crowds and safety in numbers. But I kept checking my mirrors obsessively, looking for that dark sedan, and every car behind me looked suspicious. I stopped for gas in a town called Kilgore, and while I was filling up I noticed a guy leaning against the building, smoking a cigarette and staring at me. Not just looking, staring, with this intensity that made my skin crawl. He was different from the hoodie guy, older, maybe 50, with a weathered face and dead eyes. But there was something in his expression that felt connected, like he knew about me, like he was expecting me. I finished pumping gas as fast as I could and got back on the road, but now I was really scared. 2 different guys in 2 different locations, both watching me with that same unsettling focus. It couldn't be coincidence. Something was happening here, something organized, and I was caught in the middle of it without understanding the rules. I pulled over at a rest stop to calm down and think, and that's when I found the second mark. This time it wasn't chalk. It was a small sticker, maybe 2 inches across, stuck to the side of my Airstream near the door. It had the same symbol from before, that circle with a line through it, and underneath it was a number. 1. Someone had marked me again, and they'd done it recently, probably while I was getting gas in Kilgore. I peeled the sticker off with shaking hands and sat in the rest stop parking lot trying to figure out what to do. Call the police again? They'd already made it clear they thought I was paranoid. Drive to the nearest FBI office. And tell them what exactly? That someone put a sticker on my RV and I'd seen some guys looking at me? I had no proof of anything, no evidence that would make anyone take me seriously. But I knew. God, I knew that I was in danger. Real, immediate danger. I started searching online again, digging deeper into forums and true crime sites, looking for any information about marking systems or organized crime in East Texas. And that's when I found the articles about Kenneth McDuff. McDuff had been a serial killer who operated in Texas in the 60s and again in the 90s after he was paroled. He'd murdered at least 14 people, maybe more, and he'd had accomplices. People who helped him find victims, who scouted for him, who were part of a network. He'd been executed in 1998, but the articles mentioned that some investigators believed his network had been larger than anyone realized, that there were others who'd never been caught. I found one blog post from a retired detective who claimed that McDuff's methods, the way he identified and tracked victims, had been adopted by others, that there was a copycat element in some unsolved cases from the early 2000s. The detective mentioned markings, symbols used to communicate between members of a hunting network. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. This was real. This was actually happening. I wasn't paranoid. I'd stumbled into something horrifying, some kind of network that still existed, that was still operating. The marks meant I'd been selected, identified as a target. The number 1 probably meant I was alone, traveling solo, vulnerable. I tried to think clearly through the panic. I needed to get somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses and security. I needed to change my appearance somehow, make the airstream less identifiable. And I needed help, real help, from someone who would believe me. I called my ex-girlfriend Rachel, even though we hadn't spoken in months, because she was the only person I could think of who might actually listen. She answered on the 3rd ring, surprised to hear from me, and I could hear the concern in her voice when I started explaining. She didn't interrupt, didn't tell me I was crazy, just listened as I spilled everything out. The man in the industrial park, the chalk marks, the sticker, the car following me, all of it. When I finished, there was a long silence, and then she said something that made my blood freeze. "Gordon, my cousin works for the Texas Rangers. I'm going to call her right now. Don't move from that rest stop. Don't talk to anyone. Just wait there, and I'll call you back in 5 minutes." Her voice had changed from concerned to deadly serious, and I realized she believed me. She actually believed me. And somehow that was almost as scary as everything else, because it meant this was real enough that even someone who knew me, who knew I wasn't prone to paranoia or drama, thought I was in genuine danger. Rachel called back in 3 minutes, not 5, and her voice was tight with urgency. "Okay, listen carefully. My cousin is contacting the local authorities right now. She wants you to drive to the sheriff's office in Longview. It's about 20 minutes from where you are. Do not stop anywhere else. Do not talk to anyone. If you see that car again, call 911 immediately and stay on the line." "Gordon," she said, "this is serious. There's been an investigation into missing travelers in East Texas, and what you're describing matches a pattern they've been tracking." My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Part of me had wanted someone to tell me I was overreacting, that everything was fine. But Rachel's cousin had just confirmed my worst fears. I pulled out of the rest stop and headed toward Longview, keeping my speed exactly at the limit, checking my mirrors every few seconds. The highway was relatively empty, just a few cars here and there, and I scrutinized each one looking for that dark sedan. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed a pickup truck behind me, staying back about 100 yards, but matching my speed exactly. When I slowed down, it slowed down. When I sped up slightly, it sped up. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I grabbed my phone and called 911, told them I was being followed, gave them my location. The dispatcher told me to stay on the highway, that a patrol car was being dispatched to intercept, that I should keep driving toward Longview and not stop for anything. The pickup got closer, pulling up right behind me now, close enough that I could see there were 2 people in the cab. The driver was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, and I couldn't make out his face. The passenger was the guy from Kilgore, the one who'd been staring at me at the gas station. I was sure of it. He was leaning forward, looking at my Airstream, and then he pointed at something and the driver nodded. They were communicating about me, planning something, and I was trapped on a 2-lane highway with nowhere to go. The dispatcher was still on the line, asking me questions, telling me patrol was 3 minutes out, but 3 minutes felt like an eternity when you're being hunted. The pickup suddenly accelerated and pulled into the oncoming lane, coming up beside me even though there was a curve ahead and they couldn't see if anyone was coming. The passenger rolled down his window, and I made the mistake of looking over. He was smiling, that same disturbing smile the hoodie guy had given me, and he held up his phone, pointing it at me like he was taking my picture. Then he made a gesture, drawing his finger across his throat, slow and deliberate. The universal sign for you're dead. The pickup dropped back behind me as a car appeared around the curve, and I was crying now, actually crying, my vision blurred and my whole body shaking. This was real. They were going to kill me, and they wanted me to know it was coming. Blue lights appeared in my rearview mirror, a Texas Highway Patrol cruiser, coming up fast with sirens wailing. The pickup immediately slowed and turned off onto a side road, disappearing like they'd never been there. The patrol car pulled up beside me, and the officer gestured for me to follow him. He led me to the Longview Sheriff's office, staying behind me the whole way. And when we pulled into the parking lot, there were already 3 other vehicles waiting, 2 more patrol cars and an unmarked sedan. A woman in civilian clothes approached as I climbed out of the Airstream, my legs barely holding me up. "Mr. Mathis? I'm Ranger Elizabeth Cortez. We need to talk, and we need to talk right now. You've stumbled into something very dangerous, and I need you to tell me everything." They brought me inside to an interview room, and Ranger Cortez spread out a map on the table. It was marked with red pins, dozens of them, spread across East Texas. Each of these pins represents a missing person or unsolved murder from the last 15 years, she said. All of them were travelers, RVers, van dwellers, people passing through. We've suspected for years that there's an organized network operating in this region, but we've never been able to prove it or catch anyone in the act. The symbols you photographed, the marking system you described, it matches information we got from one victim who survived an attack 3 years ago. She was hitchhiking and got picked up by someone who was part of this network. She managed to escape, but she was so traumatized she could barely give us details. Cortez pulled out a photo and slid it across to me. "Is this the man you saw at the gas station?" I looked at the photo and felt my stomach drop. It was him, exactly him, the dead-eyed man from Kilgore. "Yes," I managed to say. "That's him." "Who is he?" Cortez's expression was grim. "His name is Robert Brandt. He's been on our radar for a decade, questioned multiple times in connection with disappearances, but we've never had enough evidence to arrest him. He has a brother and several associates who we believe are part of this network. They identify vulnerable travelers, mark them using that symbol system you found, and then they abduct them. Most of the victims are never found. The ones we do find." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I understood what she was saying. This wasn't just about robbery or assault. This was about murder, about people who killed for sport or profit or some sick satisfaction. And somehow, just by parking in the wrong place at the wrong time, I'd ended up on their list. Ranger Cortez kept me at the sheriff's office for 6 hours, going over every detail, every moment from the time I'd arrived in Tyler until now. They brought in a sketch artist for the hoodie guy from the industrial park, and other investigators joined us, asking questions, taking notes, treating me like I was the most important witness they'd ever had. Because apparently I was. "You're the first person who's reported this while it was actively happening," Cortez explained. "Everyone else either disappeared or, in that one case, escaped after the fact. You've given us real-time intelligence, descriptions, locations. This is our chance to actually catch these people." She told me they were setting up surveillance on Robert Brandt and known associates, that they were preparing to make arrests, but it would take time. Days, maybe weeks. And in the meantime, I wasn't safe. They offered me protective custody, but the thought of sitting in some safe house while these monsters were still out there made me feel sick. Instead, Cortez came up with a different plan. "We're going to use you as bait," she said, and my immediate reaction was hell no, absolutely not. But she kept talking, explaining how it would work. They'd outfit my Airstream with tracking devices and hidden cameras. They'd have undercover officers following me at a distance, watching my every move. And I'd continue traveling, acting normal, giving the network a chance to make their move. "If they think you're still vulnerable, still alone, they'll come for you," Cortez said. "And when they do, we'll be ready. We can finally shut this whole operation down and find out what happened to all those missing people." It was insane. It was terrifying. And I agreed to it, because what else could I do? Run back to Boise and spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if they'd follow me, if they'd find me again? At least this way I'd have an army of law enforcement protecting me, and maybe, just maybe, I could help save someone else from ending up as a red pin on Cortez's map. They spent the next day modifying my Airstream, installing equipment so sophisticated I didn't understand half of what they were doing. Cameras that looked like ordinary fixtures, GPS trackers hidden in multiple locations, a panic button disguised as a light switch. They gave me a special phone with a direct line to their tactical team, told me that someone would be watching and listening 24/7. The plan was for me to head toward Houston, taking back roads and stopping at the kinds of places where I'd be vulnerable: rest stops, industrial areas, isolated camping spots. I was supposed to act normal, act alone, give them opportunities. And I was supposed to trust that when things went bad, the cavalry would arrive in time. We practiced scenarios: what to do if someone approached, how to signal if I was in immediate danger. Cortez looked me in the eye before I left and said, "Gordon, if at any point you want to bail on this, you just say the word. No judgment. This is above and beyond what any civilian should have to do." But I shook my head. I was already in this. They'd already marked me. The only way out was through. The first 2 days were uneventful, almost boring. I drove. I stopped. I pretended to be a normal traveler, and nothing happened. The surveillance team, who I never saw but knew were there, reported no suspicious activity, no sign of Brand or his associates. On the third day, I parked at a rest stop outside Huntsville, and that's when things started happening. A car pulled in about an hour after me, and I recognized it immediately, the dark sedan from Tyler. My heart rate spiked, but I forced myself to stay calm, to act like I hadn't noticed. The hoodie guy got out, and he was with someone else this time, a younger man, maybe mid-20s. They went into the rest stop building, came back out, and then just sat in their car watching me. I pressed the panic button twice, the signal that meant suspicious activity but not immediate danger, and waited. 20 minutes later, the hoodie guy walked over to my Airstream and knocked on the door. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it, but that was part of the plan. Engage with them, let them think I was vulnerable, give them enough rope to hang themselves. I opened the door but stayed inside, keeping the screen door between us. "Hey man," he said, his voice friendly, casual. "I think I saw you and Tyler a few days ago. Small world, right?" Up close I could see he was younger than I'd thought, maybe 30, with a face that would have been ordinary if not for his eyes. His eyes were wrong, flat and predatory, like a shark's. "Yeah, I was in Tyler," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just passing through." He smiled, that same mocking smile from before. "You traveling alone? That's brave. Not a lot of people do the solo RV thing anymore. Too many stories about bad things happening to travelers out here." The way he said it, "bad things happening," made it clear he wasn't warning me. He was threatening me, letting me know that he knew I was alone, that he knew I was vulnerable. "I'm actually meeting up with friends in Houston." I lied, repeating the script Cortez had given me. "Should be there tomorrow." He nodded slowly, looking past me into the Airstream like he was cataloging everything inside. "That's good. Real good. You be careful out there, Gordon." He said my name, and ice flooded my veins. I'd never told him my name. He knew it already, which meant they'd been researching me, following me, planning. He turned and walked back to the sedan, and I closed the door and locked it, my hands shaking so hard I could barely turn the bolt. The surveillance team moved in minutes later, but the sedan was already gone, vanished like smoke. They'd gotten photos, license plate numbers, everything they needed. That night, Cortez called me. "We've identified the man who came to your door. His name is Travis McDuff, Robert Brand's nephew. And here's the important part, Gordon. He's the grandson of Kenneth McDuff, that serial killer from the articles you read. This is his family, carrying on his legacy. We've got enough now to bring them all in. Tomorrow morning, we're executing search warrants and making arrests. You did it. You helped us crack open something we've been chasing for 15 years. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was exhausted. Exhausted and grateful to be alive. They arrested 7 people in the network over the next 48 hours, and they found evidence, journals, trophies, locations of burial sites, that would keep investigators busy for years. I testified at the preliminary hearings 6 months later, and Travis McDuff stared at me the whole time with those dead shark eyes, like he was memorizing my face for some future revenge that would never come, because he'd be spending the rest of his life in prison. Cortez told me they'd identified remains from 11 victims, with more sites still being excavated. 11 families getting closure because I'd been paranoid enough to notice chalk marks and brave enough, or stupid enough, to let myself be bait. I sold the Airstream after the trial. Couldn't bring myself to travel in it anymore. Couldn't separate it from those weeks of fear. I moved back to Boise, got an apartment, went back to working from an office instead of the road. Rachel and I tried to make things work again, and for a while it was good, but the experience had changed me in ways I couldn't explain to her. I still have nightmares about that smile, that wave, that finger drawn across the throat. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder how many other networks are out there, how many travelers have disappeared into darkness because they parked in the wrong place or trusted the wrong person. The open road isn't freedom anymore. It's a hunting ground, and the monsters don't wear masks. They wear hoodies and baseball caps, and they smile at you before they kill you. My name is Marcus Vance. I'm 43 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I've been doing the RV life thing for about 2 years now, ever since my divorce left me with more freedom than I knew what to do with. My rig's a 2015 Winnebago, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I travel with my girlfriend Sarah, who's 38, and honestly, she's the reason I still enjoy this lifestyle. She's got this adventurous streak that keeps things interesting, even when we end up in the middle of nowhere with questionable cell service. We were heading through Texas, specifically near League City, just southeast of Houston. Sarah had read about some old oil fields out there, said it'd make for good photography. She's always chasing the perfect shot for her Instagram, and I'm always chasing her. So yeah, we ended up on this dirt road that Google Maps swore was legitimate. The sun was already dipping low when we pulled off Farm Road 2004, onto what looked like an access road leading into the fields. You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's what hit me the moment we stopped. The air smelled wrong, like old metal and something sweet that had gone bad. Sarah didn't seem to notice, already jumping out with her camera, talking about golden hour lighting. I remember thinking the landscape looked almost biblical in its emptiness, just flat earth stretching forever with those rusty pump jacks nodding up and down like they were agreeing with some joke I wasn't in on. There were no other vehicles around, no houses, nothing. Just us and the mechanical groaning of those pumps pulling up whatever the hell was left down there. We'd been driving for 8 hours straight from New Mexico, and I was beat. Sarah wanted to stay the night right there, said the isolation was perfect, that we'd get incredible sunrise shots. I wasn't thrilled about it, but she had this way of making me feel like I was being paranoid for no reason. "It's just a field, Mark," she said, laughing at me while setting up her tripod. So I started leveling the RV, hooking up our little generator because we were dry camping. That's when I noticed the first weird thing. There were tire tracks everywhere, crisscrossing the dirt like someone had been doing donuts out here. Fresh ones too. Couldn't have been more than a day or two old. I pointed it out to Sarah, but she shrugged it off. "Probably just kids partying," she said. "Yeah, maybe. But it felt wrong, you know? Like, why would anyone party way the hell out here?" As darkness settled in proper, the temperature dropped fast. Texas in October does that. Hot as hell during the day. Then suddenly you're reaching for a jacket. We made dinner, some pasta things Sarah threw together, and ate outside under the stars because that's what you do when you're RV camping. The stars were incredible, I'll give her that. No light pollution for miles meant you could see the Milky Way stretched across the sky like someone had spilled milk. But those pump jacks kept groaning, this rhythmic sound that should have been soothing but somehow wasn't. Around 9 o'clock, Sarah went inside to edit photos on her laptop, and I stayed out to have a beer and enjoy the quiet. Except it wasn't quiet. I started hearing this other sound, underneath the pumps. Like voices, maybe? Or whine through metal. I couldn't tell. I walked about 50 feet from the RV, trying to figure out where it was coming from, when my boot hit something that crunched. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and looked down. At first I thought it was just trash. People dump all kinds of crap in remote areas like this. But then I saw what it actually was, a whole bunch of women's jewelry scattered in the dirt. Cheap stuff mostly, the kind you'd get at a mall kiosk, but there was a lot of it. Earrings, bracelets, a couple of necklaces tangled together. And they were sitting in this shallow depression, almost like someone had dug a hole and then filled it back in. The disturbing part? Some of the jewelry still had price tags on it, like it had never been worn. I bent down and picked up one of the bracelets. It had this little charm that said "best friends" in cursive letters. My stomach did this weird flip because suddenly I was thinking about all those true crime podcasts Sarah's always listening to, the ones about girls who go missing in isolated areas. I dropped the bracelet like it had burned me and backed away. That's when I heard the truck. The truck came from the same direction we'd driven in from, headlights bouncing over the uneven dirt road. I jogged back to the RV, trying to look casual, but my heart was hammering. Sarah poked her head out the door, squinting into the darkness. "Who the hell is that?" she asked, and I could hear the edge in her voice. The truck slowed as it approached, then stopped about 30 yards away, engine still running. It was an old Ford, maybe late 90s, with a toolbox in the bed and rust eating through the wheel wells. For a long moment, nothing happened, just the truck idling there, headlights pointed at us like searchlights. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, probably in his 50s, wearing work clothes covered in oil stains. He didn't wave or call out a greeting, just started walking toward us with this deliberate pace that made every instinct in my body scream. "Evening," he said when he got close enough. His voice was rough, like he'd been smoking since he was 12. "Y'all know you're on private property, right?" I forced a smile, trying to play it cool. "Sorry about that, man. We didn't see any signs. Just looking for a place to park for the night." He looked at the RV, then at Sarah, then back at me. His eyes were weird, not crazy or anything dramatic like in the movies, just empty, like looking at a mannequin. "This here's oil company land," he said. "They don't like people camping out here. Had some trouble a while back." I asked what kind of trouble, trying to sound friendly and curious rather than scared shitless. He didn't answer right away, just scratched at his jaw and looked around like he was checking to see if anyone else was watching. "Just trouble," he finally said. "Best if y'all move along. There's a Walmart about 20 miles west. They let RVs park overnight." Sarah, God love her, decided this was the moment to be stubborn. "We're not hurting anything," she said, stepping down from the RV. "We'll be gone first thing in the morning." The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He took a step closer, and I instinctively moved between him and Sarah. "Ma'am," he said, looking past me at her, "I'm not asking. This land's got history. Bad history. You really don't want to be out here after dark." The way he said it wasn't threatening exactly. More like a warning, but one that came with knowledge he wasn't sharing. I asked him what he meant by bad history, and he just shook his head. "Folks go missing out here sometimes. Been that way for years. Oil companies know about it. Police know about it. But nobody does nothing because it's easier to pretend it don't happen." He pointed at the pump jack nearest to us. "See that one? They found a girl buried right next to it back in '89. Then another one in '93. Then they stopped looking." My blood went cold. I thought about that jewelry I'd found, scattered in the dirt like breadcrumbs leading to hell. Sarah grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. The man must have seen the fear on our faces because he nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "you're starting to get it. This whole area," he gestured around us, "it's a dumping ground. Has been for decades. Some folks say it's because the oil workers back in the day figured nobody'd look for bodies in a place where people were already digging holes. Others say there's something about the land itself that attracts bad people. Either way, you don't want to be here when it gets full dark." I asked him who he was, why he was out here if it was so dangerous. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "I work for the company. Do rounds, make sure the equipment's running. And I make sure people like you don't end up as another cold case file." We didn't argue after that. I told him we'd pack up and leave right away, and he just nodded and walked back to his truck. But he didn't leave. He sat there, engine running, watching us while we frantically started breaking down our setup. Sarah was moving fast, throwing stuff into the RV without her usual organization. "Mark," she whispered as we worked. "I looked him up while you were talking to him. There's a news article from 2003 about a maintenance worker out here who was suspected in one of the murders. They never charged him, but she showed me her phone, and there was a grainy photo that could have been the same guy, maybe 20 years younger." The article talked about the Texas killing fields, about dozens of girls found in these oil fields over the years, about investigations that went nowhere. My hands were shaking as I disconnected the water line. The man's truck headlights stayed on us the whole time, like stage lights for the world's worst performance. We were almost ready to go, maybe 5 minutes from getting the hell out of there, when Sarah screamed. I spun around and saw her standing at the back of the RV, staring at something on the ground. I ran over, and that's when I saw it. A hand, pale and dirt-covered, sticking up from the earth about 3 feet from our rear tire. Not a whole body, just a hand, like someone reaching up from underground. The fingers were curled slightly, and there was a ring on one of them, silver, with a little turquoise stone. Sarah was hyperventilating, backing away, and I grabbed her shoulders to steady her. "Get in the RV," I told her. "Right now." But before we could move, the man was there, suddenly standing right behind us. I hadn't heard him approach, hadn't heard his truck door open. He looked down at the hand like he was examining a broken piece of equipment. "Huh," he said, real casual. "Must have shifted when you parked. The ground settles funny out here." I wanted to scream at him, ask him what the fuck he meant by that, but my throat had closed up. Sarah found her voice first. "We need to call the police," she said, pulling out her phone. The man reached out, not aggressive, just quick, and pushed her phone down. "No signal out here," he said. "And even if there was, what do you think they're gonna do? Dig up the whole field? They already know what's out here. Been knowing for 40 years. He squatted down next to the hand, studying it like a scientist. "This one's old," he said. "Probably from the 80s, judging by the ring. They used to wear them like that back then." The way he talked about it, so matter-of-fact, made my skin crawl. I asked him how many there were, how many bodies were buried out here, and he stood up and looked me dead in the eye. "Enough that y'all parking here wasn't an accident," he said. "This place has a way of calling to people. Some come looking for it without knowing why. Others," he glanced at the hand, "they didn't have a choice." Sarah was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, and I was trying to process what he was saying. Was he implying we'd been drawn here somehow? That was crazy. We'd just followed a road, made a random decision to stop. Nothing supernatural about it. But then I remembered how insistent Sarah had been about staying here, how she'd brushed off every red flag I'd pointed out. And that jewelry I'd found. How had it stayed scattered on the surface all this time? Shouldn't it have been buried or blown away? The man watched me thinking, and he nodded like he could read my mind. "You're starting to understand," he said. "This place don't let go easy. Once you're here, it wants to keep you." I told him that was bullshit, that we were leaving right now, and he could either help us or get out of the way. But when I turned toward the RV, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The front tire, the driver's side front tire, was completely flat. Not just low, but shredded, like someone had taken a knife to it. I know for a fact it was fine 10 minutes ago, because I checked it when we started packing up. Sarah saw it too and let out this broken sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "No," she said. "No, no, no." The man sighed, like this was unfortunate but expected. "Y'all got a spare?" he asked. I nodded, still not believing what I was seeing. "Then I'd suggest you change it quick. You don't want to be out here much longer." He walked back toward his truck, and I noticed for the first time that he was limping slightly, favoring his left leg. When he reached his door, he called back to us. "And don't go looking around anymore. You already found one. The others get jealous." I didn't know what the hell that meant, and I didn't want to know. I grabbed the jack and the spare from the storage compartment under the RV, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the wrench. Sarah stood watch, scanning the darkness like she expected something to come crawling out of it. The man's truck was still there, idling, but he'd turned off his headlights. I could see his silhouette through the windshield, just sitting there, watching us struggle. It took me maybe 15 minutes to change the tire, should have taken 5, but I kept dropping the lug nuts, kept having to stop and wipe the sweat out of my eyes even though it wasn't hot anymore. The whole time, I kept thinking about that hand sticking out of the ground, about the ring on its finger, about some girl who'd worn that ring and thought she had a whole life ahead of her. When I finally got the spare on and tightened, I stood up and realized something horrifying. There were more of them now. More hands, more shapes in the dirt, all around our RV in a rough circle. I didn't say anything to Sarah about the hands. Didn't want to send her into a full panic, but I could tell she'd seen them too. Her eyes were darting around, landing on each pale shape jutting from the earth, and her breathing had gone shallow and quick. I threw the jack and the ruined tire into the storage compartment, not bothering to secure anything properly, just wanting to get moving. "Let's go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We climbed into the RV, and I fired up the engine. It coughed once, twice, then caught. Thank God. I put it in gear and started rolling forward, but the man's truck suddenly lurched to life and cut across our path, blocking us. He got out again, moving faster this time, and walked right up to my window. I considered just ramming his truck, pushing it out of the way, but something in his expression stopped me. "You can't leave yet," he said, and now he sounded different. Urgent, almost scared, which terrified me more than anything else had. "It's past midnight. You cross the property line after midnight. You'll take something with you." I asked him what the hell he was talking about, and he leaned in close to the window. His breath fogged the glass. "The girls," he said. "The ones buried here. They don't rest. They can't. And if you leave during their hours, midnight to 4 a.m., one of them will follow you. Attach herself to you. I've seen it happen. Couple came through here in 2015, didn't listen, drove off around 2 in the morning. They made it about 50 miles before they crashed into a bridge support doing 90 miles an hour. No brake marks. When they pulled the bodies out, the woman was in the passenger seat, but they found another woman in the back. Couldn't identify her. No records, no DNA match. Like she'd never existed." Sarah grabbed my arm so hard I thought she'd break it. "You're lying," she said. "You're just trying to scare us." The man shook his head slowly. "Lady, I got no reason to lie. I'm trying to save your lives. You stay put until 4 a.m., then you can leave. That's the rule. That's always been the rule." I looked at the clock on the dashboard, 12:47 a.m. 3 hours and 13 minutes. Could we last that long out here, surrounded by whatever the hell this place was? Did we have a choice? I looked at Sarah, and she looked back at me, and I saw the same desperate calculation in her eyes. The man must have taken our silence as agreement because he nodded and stepped back from the window. "Keep your doors locked," he said. "Don't open them for anyone, no matter what you hear. And don't look out the windows too much. Sometimes they get close enough to see." He walked back to his truck, got in, and drove about 100 feet away before stopping again. He turned his headlights off, and his truck became just another shadow in the darkness. I locked all the doors, checked them twice, then closed all the blinds and curtains. Sarah and I sat at the little dinette table, not talking, just listening. For a while, there was nothing, just the hum of our generator and the distant groaning of the oil pumps. Then, around 1:15, the knocking started. Soft at first, almost polite, like someone asking permission to come in. It came from the door, then moved to the side window, then to the back. Tap, 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 rhythmic and patient. Sarah whispered, "Don't look," but I couldn't help myself. I pulled back the curtain just a crack and immediately wished I hadn't. There was a face pressed against the window, a young woman, maybe 20, with long dark hair matted with dirt. Her skin was gray, her lips blue, and her eyes were completely white, no pupils at all. She was mouthing something, the same words over and over, but no sound came out. I dropped the curtain and backed away, my heart trying to hammer its way out of my chest. "What did you see?" Sarah asked, but I couldn't answer. I just shook my head and pulled her away from the windows. The knocking got louder, more insistent. There were multiple sources now, all around the RV, like we were surrounded. I heard scratching too, nails on metal, and something that sounded like crying but wasn't quite right. Too high-pitched, too rhythmic, like a recording played at the wrong speed. Sarah started praying, something I'd never heard her do before, just whispering, "Please, please, please," over and over. I checked my phone. No signal, just like the man had said. The clock read 2:03 a.m. We had almost 2 hours left. I thought about making a run for it, just gunning the engine and smashing through whatever was out there, but I kept seeing that couple the man had mentioned, wrapped around a bridge support, with something impossible sitting in their back seat. Around 2:30, the generator sputtered and died. The lights went out, plunging us into complete darkness except for the faint glow of my phone screen. The knocking stopped abruptly. For about 10 seconds, there was perfect silence. Then something climbed onto the roof. The footsteps on the roof were light, almost delicate, like a child walking around up there. Back and forth, from the front of the RV to the back, then back again. Sarah grabbed my hand and squeezed so hard I lost feeling in my fingers. We sat frozen in the darkness, listening to whatever was pacing above us. Then it stopped, right over where we were sitting. A scratching sound started, slow and deliberate, like something was carving into the fiberglass. I could hear it clearly. Scritch, 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 methodical and patient. My phone said 2:51 a.m. An hour and 9 minutes until 4 o'clock. I didn't think we'd make it. The scratching got faster, more frantic, and suddenly there was a crack. A thin line of gray light appeared in the ceiling, and I realized whatever was up there was actually breaking through. Sarah let out a choked scream, and we scrambled toward the back bedroom, cramming ourselves into the tiny space and slamming the door. Through the thin bedroom door, I heard the most disturbing sound, something dropping down into the RV's main cabin. Not heavy like a person, but light, almost hollow. Then nothing. Complete silence. Sarah was trembling against me, both of us holding our breath, waiting. My phone lit up suddenly with a notification, and I nearly dropped it. It was a text message, but that was impossible. We had no signal. The message was from a number I didn't recognize. "She wants the ring back." I showed Sarah, and her face went white. She understood immediately what it meant. That turquoise ring I'd seen on the hand sticking out of the ground. Was it talking about that one? Before I could process it, footsteps started in the main cabin. Slow, dragging steps, like someone learning to walk. They came toward the bedroom door and stopped right outside. I could see a shadow blocking the light from under the door. Whatever was out there just stood there, breathing, wet, rattling breaths that sounded wrong, like lungs full of dirt. Sarah's phone buzzed next. Another message from the same unknown number. "Give it back or take her place." I wanted to scream that we didn't have any ring, that I hadn't taken anything, but I was too terrified to make a sound. Then I remembered, when I'd knelt down to look at that jewelry earlier, had I accidentally picked something up? Gotten something stuck to my boot? I frantically checked my pockets with shaking hands and felt something small and hard in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out and nearly vomited. It was the ring. The silver ring with the turquoise stone. I had no memory of picking it up, no recollection of putting it in my pocket, but there it was, cold and heavy in my palm. The doorknob to the bedroom started turning slowly. Sarah was crying silently, her whole body shaking, and I knew I had to do something. The man had said don't open the doors, but he'd also said the girls wanted what belonged to them. Maybe if I gave it back, this would stop. I pushed past Sarah and unlocked the bedroom door before I could talk myself out of it. The door swung open, and there she was, the same girl I'd seen at the window, but worse up close. Her skin was mottled with decay, her hair hanging in wet clumps, and she smelled like earth and old copper. But her eyes, those white, pupilless eyes, were locked on my hand, on the ring I was holding. She opened her mouth, and more dirt spilled out, along with words that sounded like they were coming from underwater. "Mine. Mine, mine." I held out the ring, my arm fully extended, trying not to look at her too closely. She reached for it with fingers that were mostly bone, and when she took it from me, her hand was ice cold. The moment the ring touched her palm, she smiled. It was the most horrible thing I'd ever seen. This rotting face trying to express joy. Then she turned and walked back toward the front of the RV, her footsteps fading. I heard the door open and close, even though I knew I'd locked it. Sarah and I waited in the bedroom, neither of us willing to move or speak. My phone said 3:47 a.m. 13 minutes. We could make it 13 more minutes. The generator suddenly kicked back on, lights flooding the RV, and everything seemed normal again except for the muddy footprints leading from the main cabin to the door. At exactly 4 o'clock, I heard the man's truck horn honk twice. I crept out of the bedroom, checked the main cabin. It was empty, and looked out the window. The man was standing by his truck, waving us forward. The sun was just starting to gray the horizon. I got behind the wheel, Sarah climbed into the passenger seat, and I drove us the hell out of there. As we passed the man's truck, he held up his hand in a goodbye gesture. In my rearview mirror, I could see the oil field behind us, those pump jacks still nodding their agreement with whatever dark joke this place was telling. We drove straight through to New Mexico, didn't stop except for gas, and I sold the RV 2 weeks later. Sarah and I broke up a month after that, couldn't even look at each other without remembering. Sometimes late at night, I still get text messages from that unknown number. They never say anything, just show me pictures of jewelry buried in dirt. And I know, somehow, that place isn't done with me yet. My name is Diane Fletcher, I'm 52 years old, and I live in Boise, Idaho. I've been living the RV life for 3 years now, ever since I took early retirement from teaching high school English. My setup's pretty sweet, a 2018 Jayco with solar panels and enough storage that I can go off-grid for weeks if I want to. I'm traveling solo, which some people think is crazy for a woman my age. But honestly, it's the most freedom I've ever had. No husband anymore. Kids are grown and doing their own thing, and I've got enough savings to explore the country at my own pace. I was heading through Texas, specifically targeting the Texarkana area because I'm a true crime junkie and I wanted to see where the Phantom Killer attacks happened back in 1946. Yeah, I know that sounds morbid, but understanding history, even dark history, has always fascinated me. I rolled into Texarkana on a Thursday afternoon in late October, the air still humid and thick despite the season. The town straddles the Texas-Arkansas border, literally split down the middle by State Line Avenue, and there's something unsettling about being in two places at once. I'd done my research, read about the 5 attacks in 10 weeks during that spring of 1946, how the killer was never caught, how he just vanished like smoke. The case went cold and stayed cold for almost 80 years now. I wanted to drive past some of the locations, take some photos for my blog about historical mysteries, maybe get a feel for the places where it all happened. Spring Lake Park was first on my list. That's where the first 2 victims were attacked in their car. I drove through the park in the daylight, and honestly, it looked like any other municipal park. Baseball fields, picnic areas, nothing sinister about it in the sunshine. But I wanted the full experience, wanted to understand what it felt like to be parked in an isolated spot after dark. So I decided to spend the night at a rest area just outside town on Highway 67. It was one of those basic pull-offs with a couple of picnic tables, a poorly lit bathroom facility, and room for maybe 6 or 7 vehicles. When I arrived around 7 p.m., there was only one other vehicle there, a semi-truck parked at the far end with the cab dark, driver probably sleeping. Perfect. I wanted isolation, and I got it. I set up for the night, made myself dinner, and settled in with my laptop to write some notes about what I'd seen. Around 9 o'clock, I decided to take a walk, stretch my legs before bed. The rest area backed up to a wooded area, thick with pine and oak, and I could hear things moving around in there. Probably just raccoons or possums, but it gave me that little thrill of unease I was looking for. That's when I noticed the car. It had pulled in while I was walking, parking right next to my RV, even though there was plenty of space elsewhere. It was an old Chevy sedan, maybe from the early 2000s, dark-colored, hard to tell exactly in the weak overhead lights. Nobody got out. The engine was running, headlights off, just sitting there idling. I walked back toward my RV, trying not to look nervous, and I could feel someone watching me from inside that car. When I got to my door, I glanced over, and I could just barely make out a figure in the driver's seat. Male, I thought, wearing what looked like a hood or a hat pulled low. He didn't move, didn't wave, just sat there. I locked myself inside and closed the blinds, telling myself I was being paranoid. This is what happens when you spend all day reading about unsolved murders. You start seeing threats everywhere. But that car stayed there, engine running, for the next hour. Around 10:30, the semi-truck at the far end started up and pulled out, leaving just me and the mysterious car. That's when my unease shifted into actual fear. I peeked through the blinds and saw the car had turned off its engine. The driver's door was open now, but I couldn't see anyone. Where had they gone? I grabbed my phone, checking for signal. 3 bars, good enough to call 911 if I needed to. I was trying to decide if I was overreacting when I heard footsteps on the gravel outside, slow and deliberate, circling my RV. I froze, holding my breath, listening as whoever it was walked around the entire vehicle, stopping occasionally like they were examining it. Then the footsteps stopped at my door. There was a long pause, maybe 30 seconds, and then a knock. 3 sharp raps. A man's voice, muffled but clear enough. "You shouldn't be here alone." I didn't answer. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass it out. Another knock, harder this time. I said, "You shouldn't be here alone, ma'am. Not safe. Not here. Not tonight." I stayed completely still, barely breathing, hoping he'd think I was asleep or not home or whatever would make him leave. But he didn't leave. Instead, I heard him try the door handle, just once, testing it. Thank God I'd locked it. "I know you're in there," he said, his voice calm and almost friendly. "Saw you walking earlier. You're researching the Phantom, aren't you?" I can always tell when someone's come here for that. How the hell did he know that? I hadn't told anyone, hadn't posted anything yet. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, pulling up the dial pad, finger hovering over the 9. "No need to call the police," he said, like he could see through the walls. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to warn you. You parked in the wrong spot. I found my voice, though it came out weaker than I wanted. What do you mean, wrong spot? There was a pause, and I heard him shift his weight, gravel crunching under his boots. This rest area wasn't here in 1946, he said. But the road was. Highway 67. The Phantom used it, hunted along it. And on certain nights like tonight, when it's humid and the moon's in the right phase, things repeat themselves. Not exactly the same, but close enough. I told him that was insane, that he needed to leave me alone or I was calling the cops. He laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. More like he was disappointed I didn't believe him. Go ahead and call them, he said. Ask for Officer Tackett when they show up. Tell him Billy sent you. He'll explain. Then I heard his footsteps retreating, and a moment later, the car door slammed and the engine started. I watched through a crack in the blinds as the Chevy pulled out of the rest area and disappeared down the highway. I stood there for a full 5 minutes, trying to process what had just happened, before I finally called 911. The dispatcher sounded bored when she answered. Probably got a lot of cranks calls out here. I explained the situation. Strange man knocked on my door, said weird things, drove away. She asked if I felt I was in immediate danger, and honestly, I didn't know how to answer that. He was gone now, but I felt threatened. She said she'd send a unit out to check on me, probably be about 20 minutes. I thanked her and hung up, then did something stupid. I searched Officer Tackett Texarkana on my phone. The first result was an obituary from 1993 for a Max Tackett, retired Texas Highway Patrol officer who'd worked the Phantom killer case as a young deputy. He'd spent 40 years trying to solve it and died without ever getting answers. So that was helpful. The guy who knocked on my door had told me to ask for a dead cop. Great. Fantastic. The minutes crawled by, and I kept watching the road for headlights, either from the police or from that Chevy coming back. The patrol car showed up 37 minutes later. I know because I was checking my phone obsessively. A young officer got out, probably mid-30s, and knocked on my door in a completely different way than the previous visitor, official and professional. I opened it, keeping the screen door locked between us, and explained what happened. He took notes, asked for a description of the man in the car, and I realized I couldn't give him much. Dark car, male driver, wearing something on his head. Could have been anyone. The officer, his name tag said Morrison, nodded like he'd heard this before. Ma'am, I'm going to be straight with you. We get calls like this maybe once or twice a month. People come to Texarkana to chase the Phantom story, park in isolated spots, and then report someone bothering them. Sometimes it's locals playing pranks. Sometimes it's just their imagination working overtime. I insisted this wasn't my imagination, that someone had actually been at my door, and he held up his hands apologetically. I believe you, he said. I'm just saying it happens a lot. Did the person threaten you directly? I admitted he hadn't. Not really. Just said I shouldn't be here and mentioned something about Officer Tackett. Morrison's expression changed when I said the name. His jaw tightened, and he glanced back at his patrol car like he was thinking about something. What did he say about Tackett, he asked. I told him, the instruction to ask for Tackett, to have him explain. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his radio and spoke into it quietly, too low for me to hear. When he clipped it back to his belt, he looked at me seriously. Ma'am, I'm going to recommend you leave this area tonight. Find a hotel, an RV park, somewhere with other people around. This rest area's got a history of incidents, and I don't want you being another one. I asked him what kind of incidents, and he hesitated. Let's just say you're not the first person to report strange encounters here, and the ones who stay after being warned tend to regret it. I should have listened to Officer Morrison. I really should have. But here's the thing about being a stubborn 52-year-old woman who spent her whole life playing it safe. When you finally break free, you don't want anyone telling you what to do, even when they're right. So after Morrison left, after he'd driven around the rest area one more time with his spotlight checking the woods, after he'd made me promise to call immediately if anything else happened, I stayed put. I told myself I was being rational, that moving in the middle of the night was more dangerous than staying locked in my RV. But the truth? I was curious. Something was happening here, something connected to the history I'd come to explore, and I wanted to understand it. I know how that sounds, like every idiot in a horror movie who investigates the creepy noise. But in the moment, it felt like research, not recklessness. Around midnight, the temperature dropped suddenly, like someone had opened a freezer door. I was sitting at my dinette with my laptop, reading more about the Phantom case, when my breath started fogging in front of my face. That's not normal for late October in Texas, even at night. I checked my thermostat. It was set to 72, and the heater was running, but the temperature display showed 53 degrees inside. That's when I heard the car again. Same engine sound, that distinctive rumble of an old Chevy. I looked out the window and saw headlights pulling into the rest area, but they were wrong somehow. Too yellow, too dim, not like modern headlights at all. The car parked in the exact same spot as before, and this time 3 figures got out. 2 men and what looked like a woman, though it was hard to tell in the weird lighting. They weren't dressed right. That was my first clear thought. Their clothes looked vintage, like they'd stepped out of a 1940s photograph. The woman was wearing a dress that hit below her knees and a cardigan, her hair pinned up in victory rolls. The men wore slacks and button-up shirts, one with suspenders visible. They moved toward the picnic table area, and I noticed none of them cast shadows despite the overhead lights. The woman was laughing, the sound carrying clearly through my closed windows, and one of the men pulled her close, kissing her neck while the other one walked toward the woods. I felt like I was watching something I shouldn't be seeing, something private and somehow wrong. The couple sat down on one of the picnic tables, and the woman pulled out what looked like a cigarette. The man lit it for her, and they just sat there talking, their voices low murmurs I couldn't make out. The third man came back from the woods and said something that made them all laugh. Then they got back in the car, and I thought they were leaving. But they didn't leave. They just sat there in the car, in the front seat together, all 3 of them somehow. That's when the 4th figure appeared. I didn't see where he came from. He was just suddenly there, walking across the parking lot toward the Chevy. He was wearing dark clothes and something over his head, a cloth bag with holes cut out for eyes. My blood went ice cold because I recognized what I was seeing. The Phantom Killer's signature was attacking couples in parked cars, and he wore a white cloth sack over his head with eye holes. This figure's sack was darker, maybe stained or just shadowed, but the shape was unmistakable. He moved with this horrible purposefulness, walking right up to the driver's side window. I wanted to scream, to warn them, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure raised his arm, and even from this distance, I could see he was holding something. A gun, long-barreled, old-fashioned looking. There was a flash, no sound, just a bright burst of light. Then another. The woman in the car started screaming, silent screaming, her mouth open wide, but no sound reaching me. The figure fired again and again, methodical and calm, and then he just walked away into the woods like nothing had happened. The car's headlights flickered and went out. For a moment, everything was completely dark and silent. Then the modern overhead lights came back to full brightness, and the rest area looked exactly like it had before, empty, just my RV sitting there alone. The temperature inside started climbing back to normal. My laptop had frozen, the screen showing the same paragraph I'd been reading about the 5th and final Phantom attack, the one that killed 2 people on a lonely road. I slammed the laptop shut and grabbed my keys. Screw research, screw curiosity, screw stubborn independence. Morrison had been right. I needed to get out of here immediately. But when I tried to start the engine, nothing happened. The RV was completely dead. No dashboard lights, no clicking, nothing. I tried again and again, pumping the gas, turning the key until my hand hurt, but it wouldn't even turn over. I popped the hood and grabbed my flashlight, even though I knew basically nothing about engine repair. What else was I supposed to do? Sit there and wait for whatever that thing was to come back. The engine looked fine to me, nothing obviously disconnected or broken, but then again, I wouldn't know what to look for. I was standing there, flashlight beam bouncing around uselessly, when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around so fast I dropped the flashlight, and there he was. The man from before, the one who'd knocked on my door. Billy, he'd called himself. He was standing maybe 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, looking almost apologetic. "Told you this wasn't a good spot," he said. He was younger than I'd thought from his voice, maybe 40, with a weathered face and tired eyes. No hood now, just a baseball cap. "What did you do to my RV?" I demanded, trying to sound angry instead of terrified. He shook his head. "I didn't do anything. This place did. It doesn't want you to leave yet." I told him that was insane, that places don't want things, and he smiled sadly. "You saw them, didn't you? The replay? It happens on the anniversary nights, October 23rd, which is today, technically, since it's past midnight. That was the third attack, the one on Highway 67. 3 young people in a car. 2 survived, barely. The girl lost her eye. The phantom shot them and just walked away. My legs felt weak, and I leaned against the RV for support. That's not possible, I said, but my voice had no conviction. I'd seen what I'd seen. How is this happening? What? Billy stepped closer, and I noticed he was holding something. A worn leather journal, pages yellowed and curling. Because the phantom never got caught, he said. Never identified, never punished. So the violence just stays here, trapped, playing itself out over and over. And people like you, people who come looking for it, you feed it somehow. Give it energy or attention or whatever it needs to manifest stronger. He opened the journal and showed me pages filled with handwriting, dates, times, descriptions. I've been documenting this for 12 years, he said. Ever since my sister disappeared from this rest area. She was doing exactly what you're doing, researching the phantom, spent the night here, and in the morning her RV was here, but she wasn't. They never found her. So I started investigating, and I found out this has been happening for decades. Not every year, not even every anniversary, but often enough. People vanish, or they leave here changed, traumatized, telling stories nobody believes. I asked him why he didn't go to the police, get this place shut down, and he laughed bitterly. You think I haven't tried? They know. Morrison knows. His grandfather worked the original case with Tackett. But what are they supposed to do? Close down a public rest area because of ghost stories? Post a sign that says, "Warning, paranormal activity"? They just warn people off when they can and hope for the best. A sound came from the woods then, branches cracking, something moving through the underbrush. Billy's head snapped toward it, and I saw real fear cross his face. We need to get you out of here, he said. The replays are one thing, but sometimes he shows up for real. Not the original Phantom. He's probably long dead, but someone who's taken up the role, like the violence created a blueprint for future killers to follow. I asked him what he meant, and he grabbed my arm, pulling me toward his car. I mean, there have been 3 copycat killers in this area since 1946. One in 1971, one in 1989, one in 2003. They all did the same thing. Wore a sack over their heads, attacked couples in parked cars, and were never caught. And I think we're due for another one. The movement in the woods was getting closer. I could hear breathing, heavy and deliberate, and something scraping against bark, metal on wood, maybe a weapon dragging along the trees. Billy had his car keys out, opening the passenger door and practically shoving me inside. What about my RV? I asked, stupidly, like that mattered. Come back for it tomorrow in broad daylight with a mechanic and a priest, he said, running around to the driver's side. He started the engine. It caught immediately, thank God, and threw it in reverse. That's when the figure emerged from the tree line. Not the ghost or vision or whatever I'd seen earlier, but a real person, solid and present, wearing a burlap sack over their head with crude eye holes cut out. They were holding something long and dark. A rifle, I realized, an old-style rifle just like in the historical photos. Billy slammed on the gas, tires squealing as we shot backward. Then he cranked the wheel, and we were facing the exit. The figure raised the rifle, aiming at us, and I screamed. But Billy was already accelerating, and we were flying down the highway before the shot came. I heard it, a sharp crack, and the back window of Billy's car spiderwebbed but didn't shatter. We kept driving, Billy pushing the Chevy up to 80, 90, not slowing until we were miles away and the rest area was long out of sight. Billy drove us to a truck stop about 15 miles away, pulling into a spot under bright fluorescent lights with dozens of other vehicles around. My hands were still shaking, and I couldn't seem to catch my breath properly. He got out and checked the back window. There was a bullet hole, clean and round, right through the center of the spiderweb pattern. Jesus, he muttered, running his finger around the edge. That was too close. We went inside the truck stop, got coffee we didn't drink, and sat in a booth while I tried to process what had just happened. Billy explained that his sister, Rachel, had been 34 when she disappeared, doing research for a documentary about unsolved Texas crimes. She'd ignored every warning, stayed at that rest area on an anniversary night, and by morning she was gone. Her RV was locked from the inside. Keys still in the ignition, laptop open to a page about the Phantom. No signs of struggle, no blood, nothing. Just gone. I became obsessed after that, Billy said, staring into his coffee. Spent years researching, interviewing people, following leads. I found 7 other disappearances connected to that rest area over a 40-year span. Always on or near anniversary dates. Always people who were researching the phantom. It's like the place is hungry for people who pay attention to it, who give it significance. He showed me more entries in his journal, names, dates, brief descriptions. Martha Chun, 1987. David Ross, 1994. The Kowalski couple, 2006. Each one had come to Texarkana chasing the mystery and never left. The police won't call them connected, Billy continued. They classify them as missing persons, runaways, possible foul play, but no evidence. They don't want to admit there's a pattern because then they'd have to explain it. And how do you explain something like this? I asked him about the figure we'd seen, the one with the rifle, and his expression darkened. That's the part one can't figure out, he admitted. Is it someone inspired by the phantom, using the legend as cover for their own violence? Or is it something else, something that exists in the space between the past and present? I've seen things at that rest area I can't explain with rational thinking. I've seen the replays like you did tonight. I've seen shadows that move wrong. And I've seen that figure with the sack over their head 3 times now, twice from a distance, and once up close enough that I could smell them. I asked what they smelled like, and he shuddered. Old things. Decay and gun oil and something sweet, like formaldehyde. Not like a living person at all. He closed his journal and looked at me seriously. You need to leave Texas. Today. Don't go back for your RV. Hire someone to retrieve it, or just abandon it. Whatever connection got formed between you and that place tonight needs to be broken, and distance is the only way I know how. I wanted to argue, to say I couldn't just leave behind a $40,000 vehicle and all my belongings, but the fear was still too fresh. We sat there until sunrise, until the truck stop started filling with morning commuters and the world felt normal again. Billy drove me to a hotel in town, made me promise I'd check in under a fake name, and gave me his number in case anything strange happened. Sometimes they follow people, he said before leaving. The ones who get away. My sister's roommate survived a night at that rest area back in 2011, left town immediately, and for months afterwards she reported seeing a man in a burlap sack standing outside her apartment in Dallas. Then one night, she just disappeared from her locked apartment, same as Rachel disappeared from her locked RV. So if you see anything, call me immediately. I promised I would, checked into the hotel, and spent 3 days barricaded in that room, too scared to leave, ordering food delivery and jumping at every sound. On the 4th day, I hired a towing company and a mechanic to retrieve my RV. They found it exactly where I'd left it, locked and undamaged, and the engine started perfectly for them. No mechanical problems whatsoever. They delivered it to the hotel, and I paid them extra not to ask questions about why I hadn't gone to get it myself. I packed my things, planning to drive straight back to Idaho and never return to Texas, but I couldn't help myself. I had to see the rest area one more time in daylight, had to prove to myself it was just a normal place, and that night had been some kind of shared delusion or mass hysteria. So I drove past it slowly, in broad daylight on a Sunday afternoon with families at the picnic tables and truckers coming and going. It looked completely ordinary, harmless, but as I was passing, I saw someone standing at the edge of the woods. A woman with dark hair and a cardigan, watching the rest area with an expression of infinite sadness. She looked right at me, and I recognized her from the vision, the woman who'd been shot in the car. Our eyes met for just a second, and then she turned and walked back into the trees, fading away like morning mist. I didn't stop. I drove north and didn't look back, and I sold my RV 2 weeks later in Oklahoma. These days I live in a regular apartment, and I don't travel anymore. But sometimes late at night, when it's quiet, I hear the sound of an old engine idling outside my window. And when I look, there's nothing there. Nothing I can see anyway, but I know it's still looking for me. That place, that thing, whatever it was. And I know that someday, maybe on another October 23rd, it might finally find me. Billy texts me every anniversary now, just checking that I'm still here, still alive. So far, I always answer, but I wonder how long that'll last. And I sold my RV 2 weeks later in Oklahoma. These days I live in a regular apartment, and I don't travel anymore. But sometimes late at night, when it's quiet, I hear the sound of an old engine idling outside my window. And when I look, there's nothing there. Nothing I can see anyway, but I know it's still looking for me. That place, that thing, whatever it was. And I know that someday, maybe on another October 23rd, it might finally find me. Billy texts me every anniversary now, just checking that I'm still here, still alive. So far, I always answer, but I wonder how long that'll last.